rocking up and finding out what's it all about the first time you do that, because I had never had any experience in politics at local government level or indeed anywhere else. And I found it really, first of all, overwhelming, and then when you get used to it, really fascinating. Because in Western Australia, we have got to stand up in the face of an overwhelming Labour majority, which is doing its best not to do what it has said it's going to do. The Labour Party in Western Australia has, as part of its official platform, the legalising of cannabis. And we have a Premier who is dead set against it, and a few of his cabinet ministers who want not to believe cabinet are agreeing with him, although one of them certainly has used cannabis in the past. And so when I put that motion to them that they have, this House supports the government following the Labour Party policy platform 2021. And the government had the choice of either voting with us to support their own platform or voting against us, against their own platform. And they couldn't do either, because if they voted against their platform, their own party would have said, what are you doing? If they voted for the motion, they would have been voting against their Premier, which would have left them out of office. So they couldn't do anything. Well, they did. What they did was, they're very experienced politicians, they simply took the motion, amended it, and then voted on that. So the motion that was amended was something that I did not intend to say. And then I'm faced with a difficult position. Do I vote for the motion that I put forward and they've amended? Or do I vote against it? So this is what the politicians do. They are sneaky, they are tricky, they are very experienced, and they do not actually want truth. So here we are in the Legalise Cannabis Party, and we want truth. How do we get truth from the government? Well, it's like dragging blood from a stone. Before we get to that, though, one of the major problems we had to face was, what do our voters actually want? Now, there's two groups of voters. One is those who actually put their cross saying, right, vote legalise cannabis. And all that, there was two groups. Those who didn't want anyone else, and those who were stoners, the ones who really wanted cannabis to be going. Now, neither of those groups is going to be very large. We can't rely on them. So we need to actually go for the population which actually wants what we want. Otherwise, they're not going to vote for us. So here we are thinking, okay, what do we do? Do we become like the other Labour parties and take a platform and do the right thing? Or do we decide just to go as a single issue party, cannabis and only cannabis? And there's enough people out there of the stoner fraternity who say, only cannabis. You're going to speak about nothing else. You will vote on nothing else. It's only cannabis. That would have ensured that we get probably one term, if that. Because who actually wants a party which doesn't care about where your money is coming from, how safe your houses are, how safe your borders are, how safe your roads are? They want people who are well-rounded politicians who will care for them, because when you come into Parliament, you swear an oath to serve the people of the state. Now, this is where we differentiate ourselves in the Legalise Cannabis Party, because every other Member of Parliament serves their party first, whereas we serve the people first. And this is a major differentiation. But it also means that where do we go? Now, how do we actually move forward in a parliament which is so overloaded with career politicians for whom truth is actually unimportant, for whom manipulating and changing and with all the experience that they've got there of driving us into a corner? Do we want to actually fight on that field, or do we want to develop our own path and choose our own way forward? And I think it was very clear we have to choose your own way forward. And that means you're going to piss people off. Because when we start voting on, for example, railway carriage in the Pilbara carrying iron ore, the stoners are going to say, that's not important. How often have you mentioned cannabis? The answer is several thousand times, but that's another matter altogether. So the question that we have to face is, how do you actually, as beginners in politics, how do we develop our own platform? How do we move forward? How do we make ourselves electable such that next Parliament, we don't have 2, we have 3 or 4, that this happens in all the states of Australia? How do we get ourselves, and we're actually not a micro party, we're a minor party now. How do we maintain that and increase that to become a force in Australian politics? And that's where I think we need a discussion among ourselves in Parliament, where we know what's going on, and secondly, very importantly, hear from the people what would we like. And so I had hoped today I can tell you all about what we're doing in Western Australia, and indeed we could talk about what's happening, or we want to happen at a federal level. What I would also like to do is hear where you think we should be going and how we should be going there. I'll make it maybe have a backwards and forwards, but can I put this, maybe Craig?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. It is a difficult one. I mean, especially because the vote for legalised cannabis is actually coming from across the political spectrum. It's not coming. I mean, and it's demonstrably. I mean, I get a lot of Greens saying, "Oh, you're stealing votes from us." Well, it's demonstrably not the case. A lot of our vote is actually coming from the right, and that's a bit of it. I think the first cohort you referred to sort of speaks to that. It's a bit of a, excuse the expression, a bit of a fuck you vote. So when they get the ballot paper, they're looking for someone else apart from the majors, and a lot of that used to default to One Nation or to the shooters. But what we're seeing across the country is that, given that we're getting our party registered in every state, we're getting swings against the shooters, definitely swings against One Nation, and they're dropping on us. And the Greens vote is holding up. They went back a little bit in the New South Wales election, but I don't think that was lost to us. It was lost to other parties, probably Labor. But the fact is that it's coming from the right, and well, a big chunk of it's coming from the right. And then you say that there's another cohort of stoners. But I think there's a bigger group as well, and that is people that are middle class folk that are just seeing cannabis. They're now using it as a medicine. They're seeing it more mainstream, and like me, they don't want to see their 20-year-old kid get busted with a joint. I used to smoke when I was a teenager, and the time is now to change the law. So anecdotally, I get people saying to me, "They don't look like stoners." They say to me, "Look, it's just time." Or they say, "I think we should tax and regulate it, and we'll cut back on my tax and feed the homeless." So I'm getting that anecdotally, but I know that there's a big protest vote that comes to us, and yes, there's stoners as well. Look, the base at the moment across the country, it looks like we're hitting 3%, north of 3%. And in just about every state, that'll get us at least one MP up, despite the system. So I think I said yesterday, it's a harder situation at a federal level since they changed the way that the Senate is elected. So it's going to be harder to get a senator up, but it's still not impossible. As we get more and more people aware of the party, if we get in the 6% range, even with the new system, it is possible to get a senator up at a federal level. Brian, I hear exactly what you're saying. I'm concerned with us going too far outside of cannabis, that we start especially if we're like me. I'm a lefty, so I'll be pushing for all sorts of social justice policies, etc. If that's where we go, but then we start looking like the Greens, perhaps. And people will, then the narrative will be, well, what's the difference between voting for you or voting for the Greens? So, and by the way, being the secretary of the parties, it's a fucking lot of work. Excuse me. Sort of trying to negotiate policies as well outside of our central one. So, whilst I'm very keen to hear everybody's opinion, and definitely I think that we should be surveying the party members, going out to all the party members. We've got just in New South Wales over 2,000 members now. So I think a survey is warranted, but right at the moment I'm not terribly keen to be heading down the route of adding too many policies on specific policies. But having said that, I feel that if we can actually land on some values for the party, like you get up, you're very compassionate man. I've heard a lot of speeches of yours in the Parliament. So I mean, I know the values I feel I know the values that you represent, that, and they're the sort of people we're pre-selected, that we're nominating around the country, and that we're getting elected. So there are values behind them, and I find a lot of voters actually are looking for that. They may not know someone's specific policy on something, but they just know, I just like the cut of your jib. I've heard you in Parliament, I've heard you in the media. Whether or not they're talking about David or Jeremy or anyone. So I think that values base is a way for us to kick it off. That may actually land us on some specific policies apart from cannabis, but I think if we get the values right, that might be a good step in one could say.
Well, moving on from that, I think it's incredibly important that we, as a party, look to the future. Because legalising cannabis is going to happen. It's going to happen soon. And then the question is, what happens to us after that? Because it's all very well coming in with a single issue, but I look at politicians, I don't know about you, I don't like politicians. I don't like the way they will say one thing in opposition and say the opposite when they get into power. I don't like the way they lie and cheat and manipulate. I don't like the corruption I see there. I don't like the perception we have there of politicians for life, a career politician who hasn't actually lived real life. So I'm a bit biased against politicians, and what I want to put out there is a new approach, because I don't know if you will agree with me, but something is happening in society, not just in Australia but in the world. I see changes coming upon us. Not just the recession, not just the Americans wanting war with China, not just the troubles in Europe with Russia and Ukraine. I see a moral decay in America, but also in Australia. I see changes in our values. Look, even AI coming out here, which will radically change how we work as a society. The financial situation with the digital currency, where we're actually under the control of government even more. But many things are happening where I think there's a bubbling away, and that change is coming, inevitable change. What are we going to do about that? How do we respond? Yeah, and so I'll pass on in a second. My approach is to stand up and offer a different way. I'm not going to say bad things about any other politician. I'm not going to criticise. Well, I will actually criticise the legislation coming through, but I'm not going to criticise you for saying it. I'm going to make my mark as an experienced doctor at the front line. When you're talking about mental health or the general practice or hospitals, I have a word to say, and I can base it on experience. You lot can't. So I'm going to speak real language. I'm going to look for a new way forward. I'm going to look for a way which allows us to serve the people and not the elite, not the politicians, not the establishment, because it's about us as a people. I got into Parliament because I was angry and I wanted a change, and I think I can help that happen. How I behave, we'll mention it later. How do I deal with this, and how would I recommend other legalised cannabis politicians deal with it? I can talk to the cows come home. Michael.
I got a couple of thoughts on all that. I think I love that we're a single issue party and how simple that is. And I reckon I can relate that pretty much into any decision in Parliament. You need a bit of imagination. Let's talk about the coal trains. There's some legislation on them. So if that issue comes up, I'd go in there. This is me. I haven't been in Parliament. I don't really know how it works, but because we're representing cannabis users and representing the plant, I'd go in there like that and I'd be saying, let's have a look at what's happening in the mining camps. You can't use your medical cannabis in a mining camp. We're getting repeated questions about that. People, obviously they're going to fail drug tests. And this is as valid as all the opiates or whatever other people. So it's again that total separation from cannabis users from other drugs. So I would use as much as I could. I agree with Brian. You know, I'd like to think, although we come from all sides, our voters come from every spectrum, on the whole, as a party, we come from a point of view of compassion and social justice, really. And I know that you feel like that, and that'll come out naturally from you, Doc. But I think I'd like to, whatever we talk about, we keep reminding people, there's cannabis users involved there. But ending the drug war will help this situation, blah, blah, blah. As for the future of the party, for me, I would just tackle other drugs. I would like to, the whole drug war has to go. You know, it should be a health issue. It should have nothing to do with the police, as far as I'm concerned. That's a priority for me, probably.
Is that a question there?
No, I'm just agreeing.
Ask a question.
Well, the thing is, Michael, I would agree with you entirely, and it's what we actually do. In fact, I got praise from Sue Ellery, the Leader of the House, as well as Matt Swinburne, the Parliamentary Secretary to the AG, who both of them said at different times, there hasn't been a time you've got up when you haven't mentioned hemp or cannabis.
Beautiful.
And that is because everything, or almost everything, is cannabis adjacent. There's something I can say about the topic, usually, which will have an effect on cannabis users, or indeed the truths behind that. So we can certainly spread that out, but the overarching principles about compassion and social justice, this is, I think, fundamental, I think, to who we are, or I'd like us should be. Because this is what people need. We have a huge part of our population which is disenfranchised, disempowered, disengaged with society, who are struggling to get by, and they're struggling to get by because we have created a society where they are not able to fit in. Poverty is rampant, homelessness, domestic violence, PTSD is covering a whole population, mental health issues with anxiety and stress, not because I have anxiety and stress, but because I live in a situation where I cannot be free of anxiety, I cannot be free of stress, I cannot live. And I think if we as politicians allow that to continue, we have failed in our job. We are here to serve the population, to let the population live the best life they can, and not stand in the way of that. My ideology shouldn't matter as long as the people are being served. And that requires a lot of thought among the politicians. What does that actually mean, what I've just said? What does it actually mean? For example, in Western Australia just now, we're saying there's too many Indigenous people in prison just now. A lot of them are fetal alcohol syndrome, behavioural problems, a huge problem there. And it's transforming societies in Kununurra and Derby and Carnarvon. And so what are we doing? We're locking them up. No, we're not going to lock them up. They've got mental health problems. We're going to define them as criminally, mentally impaired, and we're going to see care in the community. In the community's mental health to help these people. Good idea. I like it. But if you can't supply mental health care to the population already, how are you going to do when you get thousands of other criminals arriving on the scene and saying, right, I've been sent by my parole officer, now fix me? It's just not going to happen. And what about the health service trying to do that? Where are the funds coming from? From the other parts of the health service, which is then going to be deficient as it already is. So we've now got a system in place, written by our government, which is designed to A, fail, and B, cause the other parts of the system to fail. I'm guilty. My voice wasn't strong enough to overcome the government. These are things we need to speak about. But this is part of the fascination of being a politician, seeing it from that side, and most people don't give a shit. Actually, they really don't care, don't read the papers clearly enough, or don't follow it, and it doesn't affect them because they've been disenfranchised, disempowered, and just disengaged.
Actually, I'd like to bring it back just one step, in fact, and something we touched on yesterday at a panel, and that was talking about the different models of legalisation. You know, I wouldn't mind. We've got a few people here today just to find out how people define legalisation. You know, what does it mean? When have we done it? When have we done our job? When do we actually drop the legalise bit? We just become Cannabis Australia or Cannabis Party, right? I mean, is it when we get home grow? Is it when we get social clubs? Is it when we get that it's legal to carry 50 grams or 100 grams? Or is it when, or does legalisation not achieved until we've got dispensaries on every corner? Or like the Greens were talking about today, having coffee shops. I'd love that. I'd love to be able to just get my car and just drive down to the local dispensary and get my edibles, and my ounce or whatever. And that'd be fantastic. That's my dream. But being involved in politics, I know that those things don't. When it happens, it will happen. That may be 10 years down the track. But when, I'd be keen to know everybody's opinion, or as many opinions as possible, on when have we reached legalisation? What's everybody really think?
I think, for me, legalisation is when we're sitting on a very similar legal platform as alcohol, where you can come home and eat, smoke, vape, do whatever you want, and not criminalised, but then you can also go to somewhere and buy it, or you're allowed to grow it, or you can give somebody a friend, just like somebody can. I think I brought this up before. We have a 2% that are willing to brew their own beer. You can buy it in shop, but you're allowed to grow it. That's the same sort of feeling you want to have. And when they first started, and when they first started in Germany, and they were talking about how much they limit how much people carry. Their own health ministers stood up and said, somebody can drive through the street with a whole boot full of alcohol, we don't tell you what.
So legal, when we're like beer, we're legal.
Which basically will require us to have shops, and treat it exactly and regulate it exactly the same as alcohol.
Well, no, hopefully learn from the mistakes of regulating alcohol or do it in a better way.
Yeah. But you're going to be able to keep an eye on quality, supply. You can control. Like I like the Greens idea of keeping it local and keeping big industry out of it. All those things are great ideas. But until we can actually have it without anyone getting into trouble and no criminal getting any money from it, then we're in a good spot.
So I was just going to say, but that's a really important point. I mean, what are the lessons from alcohol that we should learn? In your opinion?
Well, I mean, advertising is like this one, right?
Yes. Glorifying.
Yeah. And so as the Greens have captured with their federal proposal, it's not letting the other monopolies take over, it's making it you walk into the Dan Murphy's now and look at all those wonderful craft beers all owned by 3 companies.
Yeah, that's right. As soon as you get good, they buy you.
It's bullshit, right? And that's kind of end-stage capitalism. That's where we are, but we need to try and avoid that. And you can, having learned from that experience. So it's limit the advertising, limit the size of the companies.
That means coming at it from a public health perspective rather than a for-profit model, right?
Exactly.
Because that's the problem. They come at it from a for-profit model, and obviously their profits are what motivates them. And even in America now, I mean, obviously references to documents where they say the hardcore, that 3% of hardcore stoners in our market, we're going to keep them coming back. And it just perpetuates this, actually making people who probably shouldn't be smoking that much. Smoke
But
more.
also in the States, because they went down the greed corporate model, they've ended up with big companies coming in, building huge greenhouses, oversupplying, and now you've got the big companies cutting the price, trying to outprice the black market, and the people are buying from the black market in preference, or they're buying from the boutique grower in preference. So they're not embracing the cheap prices and all that sort of stuff. So it's availability is an issue. People want quality, they want connection, they want the community, the culture.
Yeah, if we want to look like a good,
Can't hear much.
I think we want to see a good regulated model. Like ultimately, we want to be able to self-cultivate, and legalisation in its true form would be just to grow it like tomatoes and do as you please. Okay, but in Australia, that wouldn't be like very viable because we want to, for the government, everyone to be happy, offer some form of structure, but. To have a body that just governs the cannabis sector, not anything existing, no tobacco, no government body, no drug and alcohol, no drug sector, just a new body that's for the regulation of, say, social clubs and self-cultivation, and that would look at social club structures and make sure that facilities were self-cultivating for their members, and just add, the fine print to a very basic model of social club self-cultivation in suburban areas where you have a license fee based on your membership. So, like in Malta, they've got a structure of 0 to 50 members and with a license fee of like 10,000 euros for servicing 50 members, going up incrementally up to 500 with a license fee structure change, and just being able to supply your members from your cultivation. They're the models that are based off the Spanish model, but are being just refined for governments to accept and to follow.
Well, you're pointing out very truly that there's quite a few models out there, and they've all got pros and cons. My particular preferred model I would choose is something like the laws which are surrounding home brew of beer or home distilling of alcohol. Because I don't know that many people who brew their own beer. I'd rather go to the bar, I'd be a lot shocking, and buy a beer. And this is where we get the commercial side, but on the right for the individual to then grow their own cannabis, make it the way they feel appropriate, cook with it if you will, use that type of model, I think, again a very alcohol type of model would be my preferred approach. But the question then, of course, is the regulations for keeping it like for alcohol away from children. Because unless it's medically prescribed, giving children high-dose THC in growing brains is never a good idea. So we need to find some way of regulating the business such that we need to protect those who need protection and give freedom to those who want freedom.
Yeah, you know, for me, I'm all old school on this. I just, I've always thought a cottage industry is the way to go, and I reckon there's 100,000 jobs waiting to happen in a cottage industry model, which might be 10,000 if it's big pharma, you know. And it's kind of dawning on me. I've said it this weekend, so you're probably bored, but it's dawning on me where they've got cannabis in the same boat as the opium poppy. And these are the two best pain relievers on the planet. So, you know, they control the opium crop in Tassie. We buy it back as pills. Now they're controlling who can grow the cannabis, and we buy it back through a doctor. And it is a drama that only the people who've got a prescription are going to be allowed to drive. I'm already unhappy about that, and that's the next step our MPs are trying to do in Victoria and New South Wales. It's just that same, you know, they've got their foot on our neck, and we have to smash the drug driving laws. We are the only country doing this. They're not testing people in Tassie, they're not testing people in Canberra, there's no statistics to back it up, what they're doing. It is just proper bullying. And yeah, we have to take them on. I think if I was in Jeremy's shoes, I'd be knocking on the police minister's door every day saying, what the fuck, mate?
Yeah, I agree. Like, I agree with Michael. Like, is there any, like, we're not politicians, so, but we also agree, I respect Tony Bowder as well. He's like, we need to try and achieve one thing and get it done. And like the driving laws, okay, but Tony's got a lot of information and submissions that he's put in from years ago that we could grab and hand in and things like that, you know.
They've got it all. They've all got all the info.
They've got it all, you know what I mean?
We're pretty close in Victoria. I mean, the Premier's now taken a trial.
Yeah, but that's only for license.
Only for
That's only for license.
Yeah.
Patients.
And in a perfect world, like we would actually, like we shouldn't even have this mass testing regime anyway. That's bullshit. At the moment that cannabis has become a medicine, at the very least, they should have switched off testing for fucking cannabis as well. You know, I mean, if it's a medicine, it's a medicine, and it needs to be treated. But yeah, look, I mean, that's I totally hear. I mean, it's not perfect. It'd be great if we just go and turn it off. It'd be great if they just stopped testing everybody. You know, pull them off the side of the road.
You have another MP.
We're getting riled up over the roadside drug testing, which, you know, you'll be allowed to drive if you pay the money and get it through a doctor. We want to grow our own and drive.
It should be physical impairment. We all sort of realise that as someone who uses cannabis every day as medication, drives all the time, have done, always will do. It should be a physical impairment, like starting with your left foot, 5 paces forward, turn around, left foot on your left hand on your left ear.
Well, this is a very interesting point here, and it's again a reason why we need to work with the people as to what's actually acceptable here. One of the problems that we came across in the select committee is defining impairment, and the result that came out is that the measure of THC is entirely inappropriate, therefore don't do it.
Thank you.
And the second thing is that we need to actually change to a measure of testing for impairment, not just for driving, but also for working FIFO, for example, all these times when you need to be aware that people are not working when they're impaired. Whatever caused it, whether you've got your CPAP wasn't working that night and you're exhausted with a subclinical sleep issue, and then you're liable to make errors of judgment when you're at work and other people will suffer and die. Has that been detected? It has not. When the police stop you in the car, have they determined any evidence for impairment? And if not, how do you measure it? There's Sophia will often talk about the Druid app, but there's also other concerns I heard from Andrew today, but the possibility of actually having an app that the police could put into your car. Here's your pedal, here's your steering wheel, now you're going to drive on this mock-up on your car and see how safe you are on keeping a straight line. That would be a brilliant thing if we could do that. Actually looking for ways of testing for impairment. Is it impossible? No, it's not. Do we have the political will to do that? Aha, there we have a problem. Because it's so easy to test for THC and therefore you're impaired, which is absolutely wrong. And look, people, this will change. It will change very soon. I'm absolutely convinced of that. In fact, I hope that Premier McGowan is actually in a race with Dan Andrews to be the first one to put that out, because it would look so good in a CV, wouldn't it? But that will happen sooner or later. And when that THC driving law comes into effect, I'm absolutely certain that crack in the dam is going to appear and the dam is then gone. It doesn't matter if it's now or next week or next month or next year, that dam is gone.
Apologies for being late. I have no sense of direction, so sorry about that. One of the things with impairment testing is that it's fairly cheap. So when you look at the tests, the cost of the drug tests, one, they're quite sensitive, measuring down to 5 nanograms, I think, and they are at least $30 a piece. So once you have a program that an app or something that the police can test you with, that would mean there would be a one-time investment only, really. So once that's developed and adopted by the police, that would cover everything, and also occupational health and safety as well. So currently what we have in WA in particular is a whole bunch of FIFOs who've got all this extra money, who like to smoke methamphetamine on their off time, and after about 48 hours that is out of the bloodstream. So every time they go back to work, they are going through a withdrawal process, right? You get the same with people who are very tired, they're not functioning at an optimum. You get the same with people who are on opiates, which is apparently quite okay. Whereas if you go to impairment testing, that would pick up all of those things, and that would actually set, in my opinion, a gold standard for occupational health and safety. And it is really unfortunate that we have to convince the government to actually improve standards around occupational health and safety when it makes so much sense just to do impairment testing.
Just another.
You know the Druid test?
Yeah.
That's the one? So
that's the one.
I've only got one eye. So I had to do the Druid test and I failed. Because I often like the joint in the middle because it's hard for me to get distance with one eye. So I need a special licence, I'd like to. I just want to tell you about my getting busted with the saliva cops. So I smoked a joint one morning here. I've driven home, that's 20 minutes to my place to pick up something, and I've driven back, it's probably an hour, and I sat in the car double parked out the front of the hall while the kid I was with went into the Emporium, and the cop sees me, and he comes up to me double parked and he tests my saliva, you know, and he wouldn't show me the test. First I asked him, can I see? He said, no, we don't have to show you, you know, the little line or not. So that was my first, like, oh, what a piss off. Then I'm taken to Lismore and they do another big test of his saliva, right? And get a big sample, and then they send that away for the third test. That's what happens. 98% of third tests come back positive. That's where you could have smoked a joint ages ago. And it picks up, so they charge you, my understanding is they charge you for anything over 10 nanograms. That's 10 parts per billion. So I pleaded not guilty. And that way they have to give me my result. So I tell you, outside the court, the cop was telling everyone he didn't look impaired. You're allowed over, they have to charge you anything over 10. My reading was 12.50. So it just shows you, it was ridiculous. You know, it's like, you know, if you'd had a beer last weekend, you'd still be positive. It's crazy stuff.
And it doesn't sound legal that they don't have to show you the first test.
They reckon it's in their laws. They don't have to show you. How sneaky is that?
Well, one of the things we're facing in Western Australia is that we've got an autocratic dictator who's actually approaching a fascistic state, I would think. Would you agree?
Yeah? I reckon.
And we're certainly having the increased the police presence, police powers. Recently, the precincts, so you can exclude people from precincts if they're dangerous, but the powers that the police have, they have taken to themselves, and they have refused to share what their powers are with Parliament. And the Premier is cool with that. And he's got a police minister there who has lied to the Parliament, lied to people, and is allowed to do so with impunity. So I'm looking, he's installed an ex-police commissioner as governor. The current police commissioner is very pliant. So he's got the police firmly on side, and the people are now being oppressed. The mandatory vaccinations, for example, is unheard of. And then they say, no, but there was informed consent. Informed? Yes, you were informed you'd lose your job if you didn't do this, but the consent was then enforced. And they're quite happy with that. And now they've actually got, believe it or not, they've now made the medical board work with the government that the doctors are now required to parrot the government line, and if they fail to do so, they can be suspended from medical practice. So what we've now got is the beginnings, pretty effective beginnings, of how you control a population, and we politicians are supposed to say, yes, we vote for this and we're happy. That happens in China, it shouldn't happen in Australia. And this is what we're facing just now. So I am seeing a very big need for us as a political party to stand up there and be the politicians that the other parties are not.
And that's a good point, Graham. And it also speaks to something that resonates in the electorate, and that is when we run ads for the recent elections that we're anti-authoritarian, it's a bit of a stick it to the man sort of thing as well. But it's enormously frustrating when you talk about police. It's like we haven't come far from the Run Corps, like that we're still like a convict colony. Seriously.
No, we are still a convict colony.
Well, absolutely. And you cannot, overestimate. I mean, the power that the police have in these corridors of power are just unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, I've been working on trying to change the RD2 laws with Fiona Patton before the Legalise Cannabis Party even came into existence. Well, we had hemp, but before we went state. But back when Fiona was first elected in 2004, in that first parliament, we started to work on getting them to change the RD2 laws. No, that's 6 years ago now. And the enormously frustrating thing is that there are roadside drug tests for impairment. I mean, they use them in the United States. And we're saying, look, to the police, when it finally got referred off to a working group, the police were a part of this working group, and we're saying, look, what about roadside drug testing? And they said, yeah, we could, no, we're not going to do, sorry, not roadside drug, roadside impairment testing. And they said, we can do impairment testing, but we can't do it by the road. What happens is if you test positive, you'll come down to the station, and then we need to set up a video, and then there's a 6 hour, it takes up to 6 hours, and there's this protocol and all this shit. And then at the bottom they say, which is totally impractical, so therefore we can't do that. And then it just comes full circle, and it's literally pulling your hair out of these.
So why are they so resistant to any change, the police?
Because they're the police. They're going to vested interest in keeping the...
Different in Tasmania, different in Canberra.
I mean, the Canberra model doesn't really work like a road.
Well, they're not testing people driving.
Yeah, no, they're not testing people driving. I mean, there's the cultivation model of growing outside. It's not practical there. It's too cold. Everyone grows indoors, so I mean, no one talks about growing indoors still.
So here we have, of course, the different politicians from the 3 states. Now we are going to be hopefully working as one. We've got different areas, different needs, different conditions, but what we would like to do is to get together so that we can support each other, learn from each other, develop our policies and protocols, because we are going to get re-elected. There's going to be more of us, and we need to actually present a force which can work as a hammer against the current conditions. We're not a beginning party anymore. We're not a kind of a micro one-issue party anymore. We are actually a viable alternative. We are a nascent opposition. We are a group of people who can influence power and influence the politics and politicians if we work in a sensible, cooperative way to serve the people of our nation. And so what we are needing to do, I think, is to get together more often, listen to you more often, and to work out what would a sensible politician do to be the ultimate Machiavellian.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Why is the idea of legalising cannabis seen as a one policy idea? I mean, to me, what I've learned this weekend is it seems to cover a huge fabric of the community. And I think
absolutely.
using that type of language is actually incorrect. I think it's a multi-platform.
Absolutely.
That just has used the name. The
So,
Cannabis Party.
we,
So I'm like, is that I delusional?
We did talk
No,
about this
this
earlier.
is true.
Many issues, one policy, many issues.
So when you look at hemp, for instance, if cannabis is entirely legal, then hemp growing and manufacturing products from hemp will become a lot easier as well. And then you start looking at the massive environmental impact that can have. You're looking at carbon sequestration, in particular with buildings. So when you have hemp concrete made with lime, you build a building, it's fire resistant, and over the lifetime of that building, it keeps on sequestering carbon. Now, hemp in itself, and cannabis too, can also sequester all sorts of toxins from the soil as well, including radioactivity. Now, when you look around, and there's so much polluted soil out there, and this would be one way to revive that soil. Then you start looking at biochar as well, from which can help with the soil quality, and once again, carbon sequestration too. Another aspect of hemp is slow fashion. So we are currently in a fast fashion society, and clothes don't last very long. Now, I've recently had my first hemp jacket made, and it's very fancy, and I had to have it made in India. Okay, but I know that it's going to last me for probably, I don't know, 10, 15 years at least. When I look at clothes that I buy from Kmart or any of those sorts of stores, it'll be 1-2 seasons. Shoes, very similar, they don't last very long. So when you look at hemp and the total impact that can have, we can make plastics from it that are compostable. We can make batteries from that are compostable at the end of their lifespan as well. Cars, biodiesel, for instance, is another thing. You can grow your car on your property, turn it into hemp plastic, and then grow your own fuel with that as well. So the ongoing impact of that can make a huge difference in the environment. So that's a big aspect. We will have to change our attitudes around fashion. We can't just have new items every year, though that is quite attractive. And I have to admit, I have too many clothes and too many shoes, but I'm working on that as such, and hope to make a difference there in reducing the amount I have, and certainly reducing the amount of items that I'm buying. Now, every 10 minutes in Australia, we have 6,000 items of clothing being disposed of, going into landfill. All right? That is simply unsustainable. So if you have slow fashion, that would reduce the impact hugely, including in the amount of garbage that we create.
If I could add to that, there's one thing that I would like to emphasise. Hemp or cannabis being a single issue. I very often use, Craig knows this very well, there's 3 words I like to use as part of my byline. One is truth, freedom and growth. Now, I like to look at the cannabis leaf as a symbol for truth, because we've been lied to for 90 years regarding the dangers of cannabis, and we've had research prevented, and we've been vilified, and we've been imprisoned because we are partial to a healthy healing herb. They're lied to us in a racist, xenophobic manner, and we have swallowed it hook, line and sinker. So the question then is, if the governments have lied to us over the decades with cannabis, where else have they lied to us? And we as a party ought to be using this cannabis leaf as a symbol. We are going to search out those dark spaces where you are lying, and we're going to find them, and we're going to put them into your face and demand that you actually rectify these lies, because we demand the truth. And the next thing I would say is the freedom. We need the freedom to live in a free society, doing what we want, when we want, how we want, without any government telling us what we can or cannot do. Provided, of course, this only proviso that no one else is harmed. So if I want to climb a rock face and fall off to my death, that's my issue. You shouldn't stop me from climbing a rock face because it might be dangerous. You should not stop me from doing what I want to do if I do a stupid thing, because I need to be responsible ultimately for what happens to me. But I should not do anything which harms you. And this is the freedom, the truth and the freedom. And the last part of my triad there is growth. And people think I'm poking the bear with growing cannabis. And yes, I am. But there's also growth in spiritual growth, there's personal growth, there's business growth, there's innovative developments in society growth. If we stop growing, we start falling back. We need to grow. So the truth, freedom and growth part, I think, really is part of who I am. It's not yet part of who we are as a party nationally, but it's something I can heartily recommend. That's not what I'm putting out in Parliament in Western Australia. And it is finding a resonance there. People, the opposition parties or the government parties, they're aware of this and they have little in the way that they can say against it. They might not like what we do, they might like what we say, and they always will oppose wherever they can, but they can't deny the truth.
Brian. I don't know how to word this, but being an honest politician sounds like a recipe for failure. Being a minor party person against a gale force wind of corporation, and everything is about money and power, really. It's very hard to actually make any success, and just coupled with the fact that we are becoming a more autocratic society, whether we like it or not. The AI, the cameras are watching you. So, I mean, is there an avenue for making alliances with corporations, like Gina Reinhardt maybe? She owns a couple of cannabis industries. And is there a role model where an honest man or woman from a minor party in other countries has developed to actually influence corporate control?
Well, yes and yes. I think politics is the art of the possible, isn't it? So if we need to have alliances with people with whom we're not aligned, as long as we're getting the outcome that we desire, I think that's probably the possible. And we can always look at the next stage of that. The trouble we're facing is that our society is governed by power and money, and we don't have the power, nor do we have the money. So we're always liable to be ripped off, exploited by those. And so it's a very careful consideration. And I think I'm too young in politics to be able to give you a true answer on that. But Sophia?
I too am too young in politics. However, I have opinions. One of the things that our current society is built on in our economy is infinite growth on a finite planet. So we need to adjust our attitudes, and we need to learn to have sustainable business models that don't keep on taking from the earth, and that understand that sustainable growth is a lie. It's not real. It is not sustainable. It's going to kill us. It's going to kill our planet. You know, and if we want to be happy as a people on this planet, we have to live in harmony with it, and currently we aren't doing that at all. So we need a societal attitudinal shift that changes our idea about how an economy should work. I'm seeing some of that happening in WA with some of the hemp growers. I think here you're starting to see more of that as well. It is changing, but certainly the larger companies don't seem to have that sort of an attitude as yet. It's something we all need to advocate for and normalise that sort of thinking, that we cannot have infinite growth, that should not be part of any business plan simply because it's going to be detrimental to all of us.
So, could I just say, I hear your thing on if we can get hemp out there, how good it is for the environment, but ultimately for me, we need our minds altered. And cannabis is mind-altering. And, you know, it's the spiritual, enlightening, insightful side of it that can help save the planet, I reckon. And that comes me back to the truth, your truth thing. Like, I don't know if everyone knows, but the CIA, I think it was in the 60s, the CIA used cannabis. They realised how people become so open when they're using cannabis. There's certain innocence, the children in us come out, and they used cannabis as a truth drug, the CIA, for quite a while, to get people spilling the beans. Anyway, it failed because people got the giggles a lot.
All I was going to say is that the word corporations to me is like nearly anathema, and that is because they're there for the profit motive. And that's why I love the idea of the cottage industry and coming back to cannabis. I think it's going to be so important for us to have cooperatives. I mean, I love I want I want to be have the right to grow 4 plants, but I want to have the right then to assign that right to a cooperative of 100 people that are all that together we've grown 4 plants, or what is that, 400 or whatever. But do you know what I mean?
Great idea.
Yeah.
Cooperative.
Yeah.
Maybe we should be thinking about cannabis growing like tomatoes. I mean, who's going to bother about the tomatoes? If you've got too much, you'll just share it with your friends. I'm very much in the idea of freedom, and let's get away from the idea of cannabis being something dangerous. It's not. Politicians are dangerous. We kill people. So I think I'd want to restrict politicians, not cannabis. But moving on, I think the question of what would we do in this current world, how can we make a difference? Well, I come back to what I've said for a long time now. It has to be working with the people. Think of the storming the Bastille against the predations of the monarchists in France. Look, it was a terrible time, but it affected a change. I very much think we should go, and I take from the film Zulu, this idea of the horns of the bull, the attack mentality of the Zulus at the time. And we need to actually work on the one hand of getting the people up on their feet, out of their foxholes and saying, we demand change. Did this with voluntary assisted dying, with gay marriage. We need to do this again with cannabis, because cannabis is not going to kill you. The politicians are going to kill you. And we need to get, I wouldn't quite say pitchforks and flames, but yes, pitchforks and flames. We need you to be storming the gates of the Bastille, one way or another. Metaphorically, maybe not physically, but we need action to frighten the government. On the other hand, we also need the politicians in Parliament to offer a solution, a face-saving solution. The economy, how we could improve the economy, how we could enhance people's wellness, how we could save costs to the health service, how we could help repair the environment, save the water, give these solutions which hemp and cannabis can offer us. And so the government can then say, oh, of course we're going to do this. No, it wasn't the pitchforks and the flames. No, we see the reason here, always have, always will. We support the people. That way we can manipulate, we can get the government to do what it should do, but we need to work at a strategy, or a series of strategies, and that will be the political side here, and how do we actually how do we move, and it has to be social media, because we're not going to get out there knocking your doors and say, right, protest is on at 10 o'clock. So,
you referred to assisted dying, Cindy. I mean, that's a good case study in actually getting some big social issues sorted, and those things are driven, and they have been driven. Firstly, for example, Fiona Patton got an inquiry up in 2014. I mean, it took a private member's bill to actually do that. And in New South Wales more recently, it was Alex Greenwich that had to drive that. No one in the majors would. They just don't have the guts. It's the same as drug law reform, and that's why the importance of having legalised cannabis members in there, and that we can actually drive that from essentially we're independents, but I mean that's what it takes. I mean, Alex Greenwich did a fantastic job getting the biggest cross-sponsorship of any bill in the history of the country. He managed to get someone from every party to back that, but it actually took a private member to actually drive it and get in there and go behind the scenes and, as they say, work across the aisle. But you're just not going to have the courage from these major parties, from anyone in the major parties, who's shit scared of losing elections or losing their pre-selection. And it's a tragedy with our political system. But it's one of the things that we're seeing maybe even break down right now. Like with like the Liberal Party's collapsing, falling in on itself, and they're electing progressive independents like the Teals and progressive independents like Pocock in the Senate. So maybe that is the storming of the Bastilles via parliamentary democracy.
So one of the things that I've noticed in Australia is that people aren't necessarily that engaged in politics. When you look at other countries, France at the moment in particular, people are out there, they're protesting, and rightfully so, and they're making a lot of noise. We don't really see that so much in Australia. Melbourne has possibly some of that. WA is very sleepy, I would go for. Okay, yeah, and we all need to work together on that. It's not going to change if people aren't politically engaged. And I realise it's difficult, it's a confusing system at times, and it's not always clear how you can help, but hopefully we can educate to some degree around how everyone can be involved in changing the system.
There's a reason for that, and that's because these issues don't actually impact on a lot of people. The reality is, if you're in the middle class, if you're living in eastern suburbs in Sydney, you're not getting drug tested on the way. You would certainly not be drug tested for double parking somewhere where it never would happen, ever.
Absolutely, it's targeted.
So it's the same thing before the driving laws, right? It's, I grew up in quite a working class area and saw my friends getting busted all the time. And then I went to uni and met different groups of friends who lived in Brighton and Kew and these sorts of areas. And never got touched. Not got touched for the pot, not got touched for the cocaine, never.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So that's one thing we've really got to highlight, and I think that's a key issue with the driving issue.
And
in particular. It is fully targeted.
And the other aspect of that is that so many people are simply in survival mode.
Yeah.
They don't have the energy or resources to actually do anything else. And I appreciate that. People with chronic illness, poverty, trauma, all of those things make it really hard to be an activist on top of that too. I get that.
We'd somehow managed to get the police to target middle class, where their mums and dads might actually get up and do something, and where they would have the means to do something that would be different. That's not going to happen, right? So we've got to think of ways around that. But it is hard to engage Middle Australia because the reality is they're not picked on. They're not impacted. Yeah.
I'll tell you, not long ago, nobody locked their houses, So I tell you, the drug war has had a massive effect on our society. Everyone's got their houses locked. All the savage dogs people have got. I watched that happen. I reckon it was to stop people stealing their weed from the backyard in Melbourne. I watched it. All these people would get a savage dog so no one would pinch their weed. So I tell you, the drug war has infiltrated our whole society on many, many levels.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, right? And we can go with the law and order out and say, sure, we've got this law and order of cannabis users. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
What is law and order is that the crime that's created by the drug law, absolutely.
And also incredible disrespect for all the laws.
Yeah.
All the young generation, they're made criminals for smoking a bit of weed. Suddenly they don't respect any laws. It's a bad I think it happened to all of us. So a lot of disrespect across the board because of the drug war, I reckon.
And the other one is economic, right? So if we go there and say, well, there are actually all impacted. This costs a lot of money to put this ring fence around Nimbin for a whole bunch of bullshit. We could be spending that money elsewhere. And it's, I like what the Greens are doing.
And we've criminalised people.
Obviously, there's an economic benefit to legalisation and taxation as well.
Yes.
But that's the message you need to get across to Middle Australia.
Well, I think we've actually probably come to the end of our hour there, and it's nice just to be with people. Pity we didn't have the other members, but you can see they're working hard. In Western Australia, we're going back into the upper house on Tuesday, so we're both going to be exhausted. We'll still be very active, but exhausted. We are at your service, and so what I would be putting out to all of you here, please spread everywhere else. That we have members of Parliament now who are going to work their backsides off to serve, to get cannabis legalised, but on a raft of other things which impact on their communities. We would need you to tell your friends to get behind us, tell your friends to get their friends behind us, move the people, educate them, get them politically active, because without the backing of the people, we're going to have a tough job on our own in Parliament. So, but thank you for that. Thank you for being at Nimbin, and keep on, and help us to achieve at least this, but moving into a new future where cannabis is a healthy healing herb that everyone can use without limitation.